The 10th ranked Miami Hurricanes open their season against number 6 Notre Dame on Sunday. And the Hurricanes are hoping for more success, better production from their defense. They brought in linebackers in the offseason as well as defensive backs to hopefully improve those units. But for me, the biggest key for Miami's defense this year to have one of those top 5, top 3, potentially best defenses in the conference has to do with the play of defensive lineman Rueben Bain. Here's head coach Mario Cristobal on Rueben when I asked him about how his fall camp has gone.
Ruben's approach to the offseason was awesome. He made it a point to get down to 275 pounds and lean up, become more explosive, and stay healthy. Last year, obviously, we lost him, I think, play number 2, and didn't get him back till game 5. And as you saw, as a freshman, he was one of the more impactful freshmen in the country. This system allows him to play fast and free. He's extremely intelligent. He's able to coach the guys around him as well, and his effort levels, his levels of leadership and just culture have really taken another step. We've seen it in practice on a daily basis, and we expect an awesome year out of him.
And with Rueben, he had some injuries last year, got injured in the Florida game, did come back and play, but only had 3.5 sacks, 6 tackles for loss as a sophomore. After as a freshman, he had 7.5 sacks and 13 tackles for loss. So the production was down. And for me, he's got to get that production back up. And I think it is certainly a possibility and the expectation. This is a guy that's a preseason All-ACC selection. He's a top 100 player in college football, according to ESPN. So a lot of expectations for Rueben, and he certainly has the capabilities. I like what Coach Cristobal had to say. Also, Coach Heatherman, they like that how he's playing at 275, playing free and fast. And I think he's a guy that really needs to aim for, and certainly I think it's within potential for him to have those double-digit sacks. There's only been one guy since 2006, Gregory Rousseau, 15.5 in 2019, with at least 10 sacks in a season. And I think Rueben, after having 7.5 as a freshman, you expected him, especially with what he did, all the sacks he piled up at Miami Central, to be one of those guys that would really pressure the quarterback. And to me, I think when you're looking at a guy like the last really good, strong season that we've seen at Miami from a defensive end was Jalen Phillips in 2020. The 8 sacks, the 16 tackles for loss. I think that's the kind of impact that you're looking for from Rueben, start to finish. Again, he did have some good numbers as a freshman, as a true freshman, but I think you're really looking for him to be a really impactful player at defensive end this year, and I think it's really going to help the back end. And I know they brought in defensive backs. There's a lot of excitement about some of the corners they brought in, some new safeties. They've got some new players in the back, but I think the pressure that they can apply on the quarterback, and it's not just with Rueben. Akeem Mesidor has been considered one of the defense's team leaders. He got singled out today at the press conference, Mesidor, and he's got the capabilities. He had 5.5 sacks. We've seen him be a guy at times produce, and I think Ruben's play will help, Mesidor. I think Rueben also can move around a little bit on some third down packages. Maybe we'll see him inside a little bit. I think with Corey Heatherman's defense and what he wants to do, I think he's willing and wants to move the defensive line, the linemen around a little bit, and I think Bain can benefit. I think Bain's play also will help the interior guys. The rotation they have at defensive tackle. David Blay making that transition from Louisiana Tech, looking for him to make an impact. Justin Scott in year 2, Ahmad Moten, kind of this rotation they have there. I think everyone understands, look, Rueben needs to be this team's best defensive player, and it really shouldn't be close. He should be their most productive impact player, and at that position, I think it can really help a defense. I think it's much needed for this defense to really kind of take the next step, or certainly to show that improvement from last season.
The biggest thing, I just want him to play fast and not think too much, not try to make too many plays. I think if he just does his job every single play, and he's a guy that in practice, you don't have to say it. He shows up every day prepared. He watches the film. He knows the scheme. He understands what his job is, what his technique is, and he plays with high effort every single snap. And that's really what it is. It's, for us on defense, we need all 11 guys to do their job. Every single snap, stay within the scheme, play fast, play with good technique. And he's a guy that does, he attacks every day's practice with exactly that. He comes out, and every once in a while you see a mistake and we'll get it cleaned up, but he's a guy that learns quickly from the mistakes. He's constantly working to get better, whether it's setting the edge or doing something with movement or his one-on-one pass rush or his contained technique. And he's constantly playing faster and faster. And that's all we need to see. It's just every play 100 miles an hour. Play with good technique, play with good pad level, and knock the last scrimmage back.
There were some positive marks from last year's defense. It wasn't all bad, even though it seemed that way. And certainly the scoring defense wasn't good. The red zone defense wasn't good. Again, a guy like Rueben playing a lot of plays, and he did have a high Pro Football Focus rating, in his last game there against Iowa State. So maybe that's a sign of things to come, as he kind of had a little bit of extra weeks to prepare for that game. So good fall camp from Rueben, but I'm looking for, and I expect him to have a good year. I think they really need him to be one of the ACC's top pass rushing defensive linemen. Only 3 guys last year in the ACC had at least 10 sacks. And looking at it, a couple guys who tied for 5th with 7.5 are former Hurricanes. Elijah Roberts had 7.5 at SMU. Jafari Harvey also is a guy that had 7.5. Even Jared Harrison Hunt, 6.5, tied for 12th. So 3 former Hurricanes go to SMU and rack up some positive stats. SMU obviously had a successful season with what they did last year, and I think Rueben Bain needs to look at those guys almost as motivation, because while they were here, Rueben was the better defensive lineman. But let's see Rueben have one of these seasons, a complete season, and really keep his name. If he has one of these years that I'm expecting, I think he's a guy that could be potential ACC Defensive Player of the Year. I think that's the kind of season they need for him. Whether he wins it or not, that he needs to be in the conversation as one of the best defensive players. What makes him really tough and difficult is that natural pass rushing ability, but with his size and strength combination, he's just very difficult to defend, because he's either too strong for some guys or he's too quick for others, depending on which lineman he goes up against. And certainly he gets good work going up against these offensive linemen, at Miami, particularly with Maui Noa at the tackle position, also going against Bell. He's talked about Markel Bell and his length that he has there, but also the interior guys, Inez Cooper at the guard spot, Matt McCoy, Ron Rodriguez, James Brockemeyer, all these guys providing some good work for Rueben Bain. But again, I think Rueben needs to have a good year, and I think it's certainly within potential for him to do it. And I'm expecting, game 1 against Notre Dame, especially with what happened last year with Rueben not being able to finish game 1. So I think he's got to have a good one there. CJ Carr for Notre Dame, the new quarterback. I think Ruben's going to do everything he can to get to him, pressure the quarterback. I think it's going to help out the guys in the back there, really, particularly in that secondary, really kind of ease the pressure when you're getting a lot of pressure up front, and also being able to do some things on 3rd down, move around a little bit. So really excited to see the junior season that Rueben Bain has coming up.